Welcome to this Canopy Forum author interview at the Center for the Study of Law and Religion at Emory University. My name is Justin Latterell, and I'm here with Dr. Rohit Chopra. Dr. Chopra is the author of a new book entitled The Gita for a Global World, Ethical Action in a State of Flux. He's an associate professor in the communications department at Santa Clara University. He studied for his undergraduate and master's degrees at the University of Bombay and received his PhD from Emory University. Dr. Chopra's research focuses on key aspects of modern media, technology, and cultural identity. And his new book, The Gita for a Global World, explores the possible significance of an ancient Hindu text known as the Bhagavad Gita for the crises and contradictions of the present day. There's a link to a free excerpt of this book in the video description below, but first we have a chance to hear directly from the author. Dr. Chopra, welcome to the Canopy Forum, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us.
Oh, thanks very much, Dr. Latterell. It's my pleasure.
Right. Well, your book is entitled The Gita for a Global World. Can you tell us what the book is about and why did you write it?
The focus of the book is there in the title itself. The Gita is an interesting text. It's a text that's ubiquitous in Indian life. And it's got a long and complicated history, but I would say for about 200 years or so in the Indian context, it's been one of the primary texts associated with both Hindu culture and society and Indian culture and society. And also it's also a text which has had a global resonance for about 200 or 300 years. It circulated in the West. It was very well known by among intellectuals, thinkers, and it became this kind of representative text of Indian thought and culture. I became interested in the question of why this particular text has resonated with so many people across time and space. By one account, there are something like 1,800 translations in different languages. And if you look at the history of the text, it's a text that's spoken to very different kinds of constituencies and audiences globally at different points of time. So I was interested in seeing if it had anything to tell us about this particular moment. And it's a text, in a sense, that deals with a crisis. It's a personal crisis, but it's also a crisis with a wider significance. It's set in the context of the Indian epic, the Mahabharata, which is about a war. So it's a text that deals with war, literal, but also metaphorical. And, over the last couple of years, I started thinking about the book before the pandemic hit, but with the pandemic, it became, in a sense, more timely. So that phase of the pandemic during which I did a significant part of the writing also kind of reinforced its values. What could the ideas in this text tell us about navigating the challenges that we face, whether it's climate change, whether it's political instability, the resurgence of the right, a kind of backlash against people who are seen to be different, minorities. But equally, I was also interested in seeing where the text fell silent, right? As a pre-modern text, how did it measure up against modern notions of rights, justice, and equality?
That's really fascinating. I'd love to hear about sort of what you found, and also who do you see as the main audience for this book, and what might a non-specialist or somebody who's not familiar with this text take away from the book?
Well, it's a very good question. I'll answer the second part of the question first, and then very briefly speak about what I found. So first, I should add, this is a text for non-specialists. And anyone who writes on the Gita or works in the Gita, one of the people I refer to, whose translation I looked at, is Dr. Laurie Patton. And she was at Emory University in the religion department. She was on my dissertation committee, and she's done a wonderful, she's a scholar of Hinduism, Sanskritist, and Indologist. She's done a wonderful translation of the Gita, which I refer to. And in the introduction, she has a very interesting line which says that anyone who works on the Gita stands on the shoulders of giants. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, and of course, there's degrees of specialization. I am a non-specialist also, that I am not a Sanskritist. I kind of work backwards because I can read the script, which is the same as Hindi Nagari script for certain passages online, but I'm not trained in Sanskrit. I'm not an Indologist. So I'm a non-specialist also. Uh, I'm not trained in, the tradition of Indian philosophical debates, which is another way of approaching the text. Um, so so that's one thing I will say. Now I wrote the text as I am a scholar. I know that sounds a little pompous. I'd say I'm an academic. So it is informed by academic scholarship, but the style in which I wrote it, I wanted it to be widely accessible. So I was very fortunate to get a wonderful and superb trade press in India, Westland, who and the editor there is someone I worked with on an earlier book too for another press. So the idea was to reach this wide audience globally. And, while the audience so far has been South Asian centered, it's also been global in that I've had about, I'd say, half a dozen events to do with the book, mostly virtual. These have been with scholars like Professor Audrey Trushke of Rutgers University, who's a Sanskritist and Indologist. I've had a conversation with the Madras Management Association, which was attended by several hundred people. There's a number of book clubs that have come up in India. So I've had some conversations there, and people, tuned in from all over the world, from Germany, the US, and I've had something at the Center for the Study of Developing Societies with a couple of academics, Indologists, and philosophers. So, and the book has received some good press in Indian publications. So to an extent, I feel that objective has been I've been successful in that objective. My idea was, to just get a series of conversations going with a wide range of people about it, including people who would critique my perspective. I hope to have a few more events which would be based in the US. There's been some coverage in magazines aimed at the South Asian diaspora here as well. Very quickly, in terms of your question about what did I find? So there's two or three things, and I should say that, in my approach to the book, the work of Professor Annaim has been, who I had, the privilege of working for as a research assistant for many years when I was at Emory. I was not in the law school, I was in the Institute of Liberal Arts, but I worked with Professor Annaim for many years. His approach about, ways of the legitimacy that religion has and how you can draw on the legitimacy of religion, the role of religion in the lives of people to inform everyday life. In a sense, you draw on religion as a source, but you secularize it. That's been a very important imperative for me. So I think with the Bhagavad Gita, there's a couple of things, like many religious texts, like many texts in the pre-modern context, there are aspects of it that squarely contradict modern notions of rights, equality and justice with regard to caste or gender. And one of the points I make there is that we have to read the Gita against itself. There are other imperatives of universalism which we can take as paramount. So there's a kind of methodology there. But what I'm suggesting is that we don't shy away from those aspects that don't meet modern notions of rights. For instance, we acknowledge that, and we understand that, in some ways we need to use the authority of the Gita to supersede those. Now, how persuasive that is or how successful that idea is not for me. There are two or three things which I think the Gita can be particularly useful in helping us think about. One is the question of who are our kin, right? Who are our fellow human beings and what is our obligation to them? And in the world of the Gita, the loyalty to kin, your family, is sort of paramount. But I want to take the idea of kin and ask, can we look beyond family? Can we look beyond nation? Can we think of people at large, the world, the global community as our kin? And, extending that, can we also think of other species that we share the planet with as kind of our kin? The second point is that there is a doctrine in the Gita, which is that you cannot control outcomes. You must do your action, but you do your action with the knowledge that you cannot control outcomes. And to me, this is not fatalism as is sometimes seen, but it is rather a question of epistemic humility and the fact that you must do your duty even in the knowledge that you cannot control the world. And there are, different things it resonates with. It reminds me of the great Italian Marxist Gramsci's idea that pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will, right?
Mhm.
And of course, we don't always have to have pessimism of the intellect. And then the final point is that there is one of the protagonists of the Gita, the warrior Arjuna. The Gita is a conversation between him and God, Lord Krishna, when Arjuna, on the eve of a battle, doesn't want to fight. And then this dialogue between the two of them, when Krishna exhorts him to fight, to do his duty, is what constitutes the Gita. And what I'm saying is that Arjuna's anguish, hesitation, and doubt, these are values that in our time are often seen as negative. But I think there is something valuable in that anguish and thinking about the consequences of what you might do, knowing that you cannot control outcomes, but thinking through the possible consequences of your action. So I would say those are 3 or 4 ideas or precepts that could be of value to us.
Wow, that's absolutely fascinating. And I think a lot of our readers and viewers will want to learn more about this work. As I mentioned before, we're going to provide some links to an excerpt and some other resources related to your work and this book in particular. Do you have any suggestions on the best ways for our audience to get their hands on this book or find it online?
Oh yeah, I think the easiest thing to do is just find it on Amazon. So
Okay.
it's actually an Amazon publication, media property. There is a version for the American market. It's a paperback version, and it's priced at around, I think, $12 or $13, which I was quite happy to see, because academic books, they tend to be priced $100, $110 hardback, which is, to me, ridiculous. And I think there is a Kindle version as well. So yeah, I think that would be the easiest way to get it.
Great. Well, we'll provide that to our readers. Dr. Chopra, thank you again for sharing your thoughts and time about this fascinating new book that you've written. We wish you the very best. And as I mentioned before, we'll be posting an excerpt on Canopy Forum that I invite all of our viewers to find online. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Latral. I'm most grateful and very honored. Thank you.